Phil Mickelson is 56 years old, 6 majors, 3 decades of competing against the best this sport has ever produced, so when he sits down and names the 5 players he admires most, that is not a throwaway list. That is a man looking back across an entire career and choosing with intent. Every name carries weight. Every reason he gives tells you as much about Phil himself as it does about the player he picked. This was not some polished promotional sit-down. No sponsor logo behind him, no talking points fed through an earpiece. He was in a long, open conversation. Someone asked him a straightforward question, and he answered it honestly. 5 players, not 10, not 3, 5. The way he explained each pick, the pauses between names, the specific memories he pulled up mid-sentence, made one thing clear. He had not rehearsed this. He was choosing in real time, and that made every word land heavier. We are going through each name, one by one, and every single pick reveals a different side of what Phil values in this sport. Creativity, grit, something deeper than talent. I will tell you this much. The final name on his list is not the one most people expect. It is the one that made him stop mid-thought, the one that took longer to say than all the others combined. He rattled off 4 names without a pause, but the 5th one took 10 seconds. The room went silent when he finally said it. My honest take, if Phil's list doesn't include at least one player who surprises you, he's playing it safe. Drop your best guess below before we get into it. And if you want real golf talk without the corporate filter, hit subscribe. This channel exists for people who actually follow the game week to week. Nobody is asking Phil to win anymore. He plays a limited LIV schedule, a handful of events a year. No FedEx Cup points to chase, no Sunday pressure walking up the 18th at a US Open, and that shifts how a player sees everything around him. When you are not trying to beat everyone, you start actually noticing them. You start paying attention to qualities you ignored when your only focus was your own scorecard. Phil has been in that headspace for a while now, watching more, competing less, thinking about golf from the outside for the first time in 30 years. And when a 6-time major champion moves from competitor to observer, his opinions stop being about rivalry and start being about something deeper, respect. For 25 years, Phil could not afford to admire anyone, not properly. When you are in the middle of a career, when you are grinding every week trying to win tournaments, every other player is an obstacle. Every other player is someone standing between you and a trophy. Phil admitted that during his prime, he watched other players the way a chess player watches an opponent, looking for weaknesses, looking for anything to exploit on Sunday. He never once sat back and thought, that player is beautiful to watch. Never let himself appreciate someone else's game without filtering it through competition. That only came after he stepped away, after the LIV move, after the schedule thinned out and the noise stopped. Suddenly, Phil had time to watch golf as a fan, and what he saw made him want to talk. He noticed things he had missed for decades, the way a young player shapes a wedge shot around a tree, the way a crowd leans forward together when someone is standing over a 10-footer for the lead. Watching without a scorecard made him realize how much beauty he had walked past. 25 years of tunnel vision, and now at 56, he was finally seeing the whole picture. That is exactly where he was when this conversation happened. A long-form interview, no script, no sponsor sitting behind him, open questions with no time limit. Phil was relaxed, leaning back, answering things he normally deflects with a joke or a quick one-liner. Someone asked him about the players he genuinely admires, and for once, he did not dodge it, did not deflect, just sat with the question for a moment, then answered, slowly. 30 years in a sport built on ego, and Phil has never once been generous with praise. The first name on his list proved exactly that. Tom Watson. Phil said it without hesitation. No pause, no build-up, just the name, followed by a small smile, like he was 8 years old again, sitting in front of a television, watching Watson chip and put his way around a links course. Phil grew up idolizing Watson's short game, the way Watson could manufacture a shot from anywhere, the way he never panicked around a green, the way he made the impossible look like a simple Tuesday afternoon. Phil talked about watching Watson play in the early 80s and thinking, that is how I want to play this game. Not with brute force, not by overpowering every hole, with touch, with imagination, with the belief that there is always a shot available if you are willing to see it. Phil specifically mentioned the 1982 U.S. Open at Pebble Beach, Watson's famous chip-in on the 17th hole to beat Jack Nicklaus by a single shot. Phil was 12 years old. He remembered watching that chip on a small television in his family's living room in San Diego. Remembered jumping off the couch. Remembered his father saying, "That is what creativity looks like under pressure." Phil said that single shot shaped his entire approach. Not the swing, not the strategy. The belief that when you are in trouble, you do not play safe. You invent something. You trust your hands. You go for the shot nobody else would attempt. Watson proved that works at the highest level. Proved it wins major championships. Phil said he carried that lesson all the way to the 2004 Masters. Standing on the back nine at Augusta, needing to make something happen, Phil hit a wedge from the rough that curled around a pine tree and landed within 3 feet. He said in that moment, he was 12 years old again, watching Watson at Pebble Beach. And he did. Watson gave him permission to try. 22 years later, Phil was still using that permission. Watson won 8 majors, 5 Open championships. Phil mentioned that number not as a statistic, not as a flex, not to justify the pick. He mentioned it because Watson won those titles playing the kind of golf Phil spent his entire career trying to perfect. Creative, unpredictable, built on feel rather than formula. Phil said Watson was proof that you did not need to be the longest or the strongest. You needed to see shots other players could not see. That pick made sense to everyone listening. Phil's second choice split the room in half. Seve Ballesteros. Phil leaned forward when he said this one. Like the name alone pulled him out of his chair. Seve died in 2011, and Phil talked about him in the present tense for the first 30 seconds before catching himself. That detail alone told you everything about how deeply Seve lived in Phil's mind. Phil called Seve the most creative player who ever picked up a golf club. Not the best, not the most dominant, the most creative. And for Phil, that distinction meant more than any major count or any world ranking number. Phil described watching Seve play shots that should not have been possible. A 3-iron from a parking lot, a wedge from behind a tree that curved around 2 branches and landed within 4 feet. Seve never once looked at a golf ball and thought, "I cannot do this." Every single shot was an invitation. Every lie was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Phil admitted that every time he hit a flop shot over a bunker, every time he opened a club face and slid something under a branch, he was channeling Seve, trying to be Seve, knowing he would never quite get there. Phil talked about how Seve grew up hitting balls in a field in Spain with no driving range, no proper facilities, just a few clubs and an imagination. Seve learned to shape shots because he had no other choice. No flat lies, no perfect conditions, just uneven ground and whatever club was in his bag. That story stayed with him his entire career. Every time Phil found himself in a bad spot, in the trees behind a bunker in deep rough, he thought about Seve in that field as a kid, learning to make something out of nothing. Phil said Seve taught him that limitations are just invitations to be creative, that a bad lie is not a punishment. It is an opportunity to hit a shot nobody else can hit. Phil also talked about Seve's personality, the grin, the way Seve would tip his cap after a miracle shot like he was surprised it worked, the way he played to the crowd, waved them in, made every gallery feel like they were part of the shot. Phil said Seve understood something most players never figure out. Golf is a performance. The crowd gives you energy. You give them a moment, and that exchange makes the game bigger. Phil said he tried to do that his whole career. Give the crowd a moment. Seve showed him how. For Seve, Phil talked for 2 full minutes. The next name took almost 5, yet what he said changed everything. Tiger Woods. Phil paused before saying it. Not because he was unsure, because he was choosing his words carefully. 30 years of competing against Tiger. 3 decades of being measured against Tiger. Every interview, every press conference, every major championship, where the conversation was always Phil versus Tiger, Tiger versus Phil. For 20 years, Phil could not fully appreciate what Tiger was doing because he was too busy trying to beat him. You cannot admire someone properly when you are trying to destroy them every Sunday. Phil talked about being paired with Tiger at the 2009 Masters, walking those fairways, hearing the roars on every hole, feeling the ground shake when Tiger made a putt. Phil could feel the difference between himself and Tiger in those moments, not in skill, not in preparation, in presence. Tiger walked onto a golf course like he owned it, like every blade of grass owed him something. Phil said he never had that, could not manufacture it, tried for years, but Tiger had something innate, something you either are born with or you are not. Phil admitted that watching Tiger command a crowd made him realize that greatness is not just about the swing, it is about the weight a player carries when they walk. Tiger carried more weight than anyone Phil ever saw. Phil also mentioned watching Tiger win the 2019 Masters, watching him walk up the 18th fairway with the lead. Phil was sitting in his living room, not competing, not playing, just watching. And for the first time in his life, he cried watching another player win a golf tournament. Because he understood what it cost Tiger to get back there. The injuries, the surgeries, the public mess, the years of doubt. Phil said he finally understood that admiring someone means acknowledging what they survived to get where they are. Not just celebrating the trophy, celebrating the fight it took to hold it. Phil said that after both of them got older, after the rivalries cooled and the schedules changed, they started talking differently. Not about golf, about kids, about competing against 25-year-olds at 50. Those conversations made him respect Tiger in a way the rivalry never allowed. You cannot respect someone fully when you are trying to beat them. You need distance, you need time. Phil got both, and what he found on the other side was genuine admiration for the man, not just the player. It took stepping away from the competitive grind to understand what Tiger actually meant to the game. Not just the wins, not just the 14 majors or the dominance or the records. Phil talked about Tiger's ability to perform when the entire world was watching and expecting perfection. Phil said he could handle pressure, could handle a tough pin position or a bad bounce. What he could never fully replicate was Tiger's ability to make an entire stadium hold its breath on a 6-foot putt. Phil admitted he never had that. Never would. One line about Tiger stuck with me. 30 years trying to beat him. Now he just wishes he had watched more. Fred Couples. Phil smiled wider here than any other name. Like the pick itself made him happy. Fred and Phil go back decades. They have played together, traveled together, sat in locker rooms together at 4 in the afternoon after everyone else went home. Phil called Fred the most naturally gifted player he ever shared a fairway with. Not Tiger, not Seve. Fred. Phil said Fred could do things with a golf club that looked like they required zero effort, like the ball was simply agreeing to go where Fred wanted. Phil talked about Fred's swing, that loose, rhythmic, effortless motion that made every other player on tour look like they were working too hard. Phil spent years in the gym, years tinkering, years trying to find an edge. Fred just showed up, stretched for 5 minutes, and hit it past everyone. Phil admitted that used to drive him crazy, watching Fred make it look easy while Phil fought for every inch. Over time, that frustration turned into genuine admiration. Phil said Fred taught him that grace is its own kind of greatness. You do not have to suffer to be brilliant. Phil remembered a specific practice round they played together at Augusta years ago. Fred was hitting driver off every par 4, not because he needed to, because he wanted to see how far he could carry the ball over the bunkers. Phil was hitting iron after iron, plotting his way around, calculating angles. Fred looked over at him and said, "Why are you thinking so hard? Just hit it and see what happens." Phil laughed when he told the story, said Fred was right. Fred was always right. The game is simpler when you stop treating it like a math problem. Fred treated it like a conversation. Phil spent 30 years trying to learn that language. Phil also talked about Fred off the course, the way Fred remembers everyone's name, the way he asks about your kids, your health, the way he treats the parking lot attendant with the same respect he treats the tournament director. Phil said Fred never once made anyone feel small. In a sport full of players who guard their status carefully, Fred just walked around being kind. Phil said that might be the rarest skill in professional golf. Not the swing, not the short game. The ability to be genuinely decent when nobody is watching. 4 names down, 1 to go. Phil saved the last one for a reason nobody expected. He did not pick a rival, did not pick a contemporary, did not pick someone he competed against for 30 years. Phil leaned back, took a breath, and said the name quietly. Not with the energy he gave Seve, not with the careful weight he gave Tiger. Just the name, spoken soft, like he was talking about a grandfather. Arnold Palmer. Phil said Arnold Palmer was the reason he fell in love with golf. Not Watson, not Nicklaus. Palmer. Phil was 4 years old when he first saw Palmer swing a golf club. He remembered the aggression. The way Palmer attacked every shot like he was personally offended by the golf course. The way he gripped the club, The way he walked, the way he tipped his cap to the crowd after a birdie like he owed them something. Palmer made golf feel alive, made it feel like a fight. Like the player and the course were in a personal argument and the fans were invited to watch. Palmer's creativity around the greens was something Phil studied as a kid. The way Arnie would invent shots mid-round. The way he never played the same hole the same way twice. Phil said that as a child, he would try to copy Palmer's aggressive style, swinging hard, attacking pins, refusing to lay up. His parents told him to calm down. Phil did not calm down. He never did. Palmer taught him that golf was supposed to be fun, that you were supposed to enjoy the fight, that the crowd was not an obstacle. They were part of the game. Phil talked about Arnie's army, the fans who followed Palmer everywhere, who wore the hats, who cheered every shot like it was the winning putt at a major. Phil understood that connection because he spent his whole career building the same thing. Phil's fans are loud. They follow him. They cheer for the risky shots. They forgive the missed cuts. Phil said that started with Palmer. Palmer showed every player after him that you are allowed to have a relationship with the people watching. That golf does not have to be quiet and polite. It can be electric. It can feel like a football game on Sunday afternoon. Palmer invented that feeling. Everyone after him just borrowed it. Palmer passed away in 2016. Phil mentioned that and then went quiet for a moment. Not a performative pause, a real one. Phil got to play with Palmer once, a casual round. No cameras, no fans, just the two of them and a couple of friends. Phil said Palmer still attacked every pin at 82 years old, still talked to the ball in the air like it owed him money. That round reminded him why he started playing in the first place, not for trophies, not for rankings, for the joy of hitting a golf ball and watching it fly. Phil said Palmer turned to him on the 14th green after a solid two-putt par and said, "You know what the secret is, Phil? You just have to love it. That is the whole secret. You just have to love it." Phil said he has thought about that sentence every single week since. Every time he tees it up, every time he wonders why he still plays, you just have to love it. Phil said Palmer's legacy is not the 7 majors, not the wins, not the records. Palmer's legacy is that he made an entire generation believe golf was for them, that you did not need to be quiet, did not need to be polite or perfect. You just needed to swing hard, tip your cap, and mean it. Every player who plays with emotion today, every player who fist pumps after a birdie, every player who waves the crowd in on a Sunday is borrowing from Palmer. Palmer built the blueprint. Everyone else is just living in the house he constructed. Phil said one sentence I have replayed every day since. Arnold made you believe the game loved you back. 5 names, 5 different eras, 5 different styles. One thread connecting all of them. Phil did not pick the 5 best players, did not pick the 5 most dominant, did not pick based on major counts or world rankings or career earnings. He picked based on how they made him feel. Watson gave him imagination. Seve gave him permission to be creative. Tiger showed him a level of focus he respected but could never reach. Fred taught him that grace and greatness are not opposites. Palmer gave him the reason he started: creativity, joy, connection, the belief that golf is supposed to be played with your whole chest, not just your hands. Look at those 5 names again: Watson, Seve, Tiger, Fred, Palmer. Not a single one was picked for statistics. Not a single one was picked because they won the most tournaments in a single season. Phil picked them because they made him feel something, because they reminded him why he picked up a club at 4 years old, because each one represented a piece of the game that Phil spent his life chasing. And maybe that is the most honest thing a player can do at 56. Stop counting trophies. Start counting feelings. That is Phil's philosophy. That has always been Phil's philosophy. Every flop shot over a bunker, every Sunday charge from 5 back, every time he went for the green when everyone else laid up. He was chasing the feeling Palmer gave him at 4 years old. The feeling that the game was alive and it wanted you to swing hard. 30 years of majors and controversies and rivalries, and it all traces back to a kid watching Arnie grip a driver and attack. At 56, Phil knows his competitive days are numbered. This list might be the closest thing to a final statement he will ever give. 5 names. One man sitting in a chair at 56, looking back across 30 years of professional golf, choosing the people who made him believe this sport was worth dedicating a life to. Phil did not pick safe answers, did not pick popular answers, picked the ones who made him feel something. And if you have watched Phil Mickelson play for 3 decades, you know that feeling was always the point. Not the score, not the trophy, the feeling of hitting a shot that nobody else saw, the feeling of making a crowd stand up, the feeling of playing a game that made you forget everything else existed. Phil only needed 5 names to say all of that. 30 years of golf, 6 majors, thousands of rounds. And when it came down to it, 5 names was enough.